In this video, I'm going to discuss the Stephen King books that I have listened to on Audible and tell you what I think about them and if I think they are worth either buying or using a credit on and why. Starting out with Dolores Claiborne, this book was on my TBR in my one video that I did not too long ago. And I would rate this one a solid 3 out of 5 for me. I thought it was much easier to get through in an audiobook form because the way the story is written, I started reading it in print and it was really difficult, and I ended up getting an Audible subscription, and I thought, maybe let's listen to it, and I'm actually glad that I did. I enjoyed it much better listening to it being narrated. I think the person that narrated it did a very good job at kind of creating a back and forth between characters that we don't get to listen in on because it is a one-way conversation. And yeah, I thought that in terms of Audible books, this one I would use a credit on. The story was very good. It definitely had some twists and turns. It was very compelling, and it's one of my more liked Stephen King books. The next Stephen King audiobook that I listened to was Salem's Lot. I finished this one in the summer of 2024. I would give this one like a 3.5 out of 5. I thought that it was pretty good in terms of story. Sometimes the characters can get a little bit confusing, but not as much as Needful Things, which we will talk about. And I made the mistake of reading them one after another, or listening to them, I should say. But yeah, Salem's Lot, I would say this is a pretty good Stephen King book. I honestly cannot say if I would spend the credit on it or not, though. If I had a surplus of credits, yes. If I didn't, I would hold off. To me, it was a relatively memorable story. I feel like you could maybe just watch the movie. There is the new one that just came out, and also one from the 70s that was like a 2-part TV presentation type deal. I started watching that one. Honestly, could not get through it. It was a little too long for my tastes, I guess. But the newest one that just came out on Max did a pretty good job. I think that it highlighted the important elements of the story that made it unique. Okay, so with Needful Things, I mentioned earlier how I thought that this story had a lot of characters and it made it a little bit confusing, and that's where I think listening to it through Audible definitely made the story more enjoyable. I would spend a credit on this one. The narrator is very talented at distinguishing different voices, different mannerisms, and it really helped kind of connect multiple stories and just kind of get a grasp on the world building and the character development. I would rate this overall story a 3 out of 5. I liked it a little bit less than Salem's Lot just because it got a little bit confusing with all the characters, and it was just a little bit difficult for me to follow. It is a longer read, but I do think it is worth it. I do think it is a unique story, and it definitely is very engaging, and I would recommend it on Audible or in print. So we are at the end of our list with these last 2 stories, and I am going to group them together because I have similar opinions about them, The Institute and The Dark Half. I am going to start with The Institute. This book was very disappointing. I would not recommend reading it or listening to it on Audible. It is probably my least favorite Stephen King book that I have finished. I will be generous and I will rate it a 2.5 out of 5, just because there were certain characters that I did like. I am not a fan of books that have, through the power of love and friendship, everything is fixed type endings, but also just kind of type stories. And that's kind of what this was. It was a little lame, I'm not gonna lie. So I just wouldn't recommend it overall. The Dark Half was actually the only Stephen King book that I have not finished, and actually the only Audible book that I have not finished. I would not recommend this one. To me, it was very boring and just didn't really go anywhere. I got a good way into it. I think I had like 8 hours left of the audiobook by the time I decided just to let it go, which was the first time, as I said, I had done that. And yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but there wasn't really much that happened anyway to spoil, but it's just not for me. So that was my little list of the Stephen King Audible books that I have listened to and what I thought about them. So yeah, thanks, and I will see you in the next one.